Hello there. You're watching All 24 News Wellness Program with me, Kieran Zachary, and up next are the top stories. The 49th Conference of the European Coordination of Support and Solidarity with the Sahrawi People, aka UCOCO, call for public action against Morocco's occupation, slam new trade deal attempts, and tell France not to block decolonization. Meanwhile, thousands marched back in the Sahrawi right to self-determination in Paris. Also in our news, Algeria is heading efforts to address colonial era crimes, pushing for a continental mechanism to recognize past violations. And regional bodies praise Algeria's role in boosting integration and supporting key economic and service sectors. Next up, in Palestine, Zionist raids keep hitting camps and displaced communities, ignoring the ceasefire. UNICEF warns famine is affecting over 9,000 children, and the UN and Arab groups call again for an end to the occupation. And later, on the war in Ukraine, fighting now targets infrastructure and energy sites. Zelensky is sending officials to Washington to push a peace plan and explore US-Russia normalization. The details are right up. Welcome back. It's great to have you with us tonight. First off in our news, the 49th session of the European Coordination for Solidarity with the Sahrawi People wrapped up in Paris, calling on people across Europe to step up and mark 50 years of Morocco's occupation of Western Sahara. The conference stressed the importance of building strong international alliances to call out human rights abuses and pointed to the role of countries like Spain, France, and the US in this ongoing issue.
The ECOCO conference calls for broad popular mobilization in Europe on the occasion of the 50th anniversary of the occupation and for strengthening alliances, especially with the struggles of colonized peoples. The support committees reaffirm their political priorities, namely holding the referendum, halting the plundering of natural resources, denouncing human rights violations committed by the Moroccan occupation forces, and highlighting the responsibility of Spain, France, and the United States. A program has also been adopted to strengthen the building of the Sahrawi state in the social, economic, and territorial fields. The priorities for the year 2025 include implementing the incentive system, increasing international support, and organizing conferences of solidarity cities.
Similarly, the ECOCO conference made it clear that holding its 49th session in Paris sends a clear message to French authorities not to block the Sahrawi people from claiming their right to self-determination and decolonization.
The choice of Paris as the venue for the conference, held partly at the National Assembly and partly at the Labour Exchange and concluded with a symbolic gathering in Place de la République, was a direct message to the French authorities not to obstruct the Sahrawi people's legitimate right to freely express their inalienable right to self-determination and decolonization. France must strongly defend within the European institutions, the Security Council and the UN General Assembly, the principles of international law and the fundamental rights of the Sahrawi people. Together with Spain, it can push Morocco toward ending its colonial occupation of Western Sahara.
The European Coordination of Solidarity with the Sahrawi people slammed what it called Morocco's misleading take on the latest UN Security Council resolution. They say Morocco's complaints are baseless. The resolution clearly recognizes the Polisario Front as the Sahrawi people's legitimate representative and calls for a fair, lasting solution that secures their right to self-determination.
The conference reviewed Security Council Resolution 2797 and rejected Morocco's misleading interpretation. The resolution reaffirms MINURSO's mandate, recognizes the Polisario Front, and stresses a solution that guarantees Sahrawi self-determination. It also noted that Morocco's claims are unfounded, as the UN Fourth Committee confirmed Western Sahara's legal status and the UN's responsibility in the decolonization process.
On a related note, and as you followed in our headlines, on Sunday, Paris saw a massive march calling for the Sahrawi people's right to self-determination. Thousands of participants, including international groups and unions, carried banners condemning attempts to bypass Sahrawi sovereignty and urged France to respect international law in handling the issue. And on the same occasion, the Algerian parliamentary delegation at the European Coordination Conference highlighted the need to let the Sahrawi people exercise their historic right to self-determination. MP Saeed Lanani also praised the wide international turnout at the conference's 49th session in Paris.
Algeria has always supported the right to self-determination of countries as part of Algerian history and its cultural and revolutionary doctrine. We are here in Paris to reaffirm this right, the right to self-determination of the Sahrawi people. Many international bodies and organizations are providing support: French, Spanish, Italian and African, especially from Mozambique. This is a reaffirmation of the historic right of the Sahrawi people to exercise their right to self-determination.
And finally, in this file, Ali Ammar al-Bukhari, head of the Foreign Relations for the Sahrawi Students' Union, reaffirmed the Sahrawi people's commitment to continue their struggle until independence is achieved. Speaking to our channel, he said the strong international turnout at the 49th ICOCO session shows renewed global support for their legitimate rights.
We as Sahrawi students are convinced of the right of the Sahrawi people to self-determination, to exercise our inalienable right and to continue the resistance until we achieve victory and independence. It is certain that the role of the Sahrawi people has always been active in the resistance. We continue on the same path and hope that our next participation will be in the independent Al-Uyun.
And in another story, on the eve of Algeria hosting the International Conference on Colonial Crimes in Africa and the 12th Iran Process on Peace and Security, Minister of State Foreign Affairs Minister Ahmed Attaf met with his counterparts from Namibia, Angola and Togo. The discussions focused on boosting bilateral cooperation, unifying African positions on peace and security, especially in the Sahel and Western Sahara, and coordinating actions at the African Union and UN Security Council. These meetings come as Algeria steps up its role in shaping continental efforts on historical justice and regional stability.
We want to congratulate Algeria for organizing this important seminar on colonialism. Algeria has always been, during the African independence movements, the country that most defended the African continent in its fight to reclaim sovereignty and to give pride to African peoples.
Donner la fierté aux peuples africains.
Je crois que
I believe these two events that Algeria is hosting are of great significance. First, because this is the year in which the African Union has chosen to address the issues of reparations and justice for Africans and the African diaspora. This meeting on colonialism is, in fact, the concrete realization of a proposal that Algeria itself submitted to the African Union. There are countries like ours that have greatly benefited from Algeria's support. We see this as a shared opportunity, one through which we can jointly express Africa's united stance on these matters.
What we want to tell the world is that the human suffering of the African person is just as acute of the non-African, and it has to be taken for what it is. We want the international community, we want the United Nations to recognize colonialism as a crime against humanity because our people suffered. So that is really why we are here in Algiers, to put heads together as Africans, to say that our history must count for something if we want to have lasting peace.
And on a related note, Algerian Secretary of State for African Affairs Salma Bakhta Mansouri met with the President of the Pan-African Parliament, Fortune Charombira. to discuss strengthening the Parliament's role in defending Africa's just causes, including Palestine and Western Sahara. The meeting also covered Algeria's cooperation with the institution, supporting efforts to address colonial legacies, push for reparations, and amplify African voices on the continental and global stage. And it's worth noting that Fortune Charambera is in Algeria for the International Conference on Colonialism in Africa and Reparations, a landmark summit launched by the President of the Republic, Abdelmajid Tebboune. Over 2 days, Algeria hosts ministers, historians, and experts from across Africa, the Caribbean, and even beyond, aiming to unify the continent's stance on historical injustices. They'll tackle the human, cultural, and economic impacts of colonialism, including the fallout from nuclear tests and push for restitution of looted heritage. Amar Abdu Ahmed, the Director of Human Development at the Islamic Development Bank, praised Algeria's key role in advancing African aspirations. Speaking to our channel on the sidelines of the African Ministerial Conference on International Local Production, he highlighted Algeria's potential to become a leader in the continent's pharmaceutical sector. Abdu Ahmed also confirmed the bank's readiness to support Algeria in developing a continental center for medicines and vaccines, reinforcing its position as a benchmark for Africa.
I would like to begin by expressing the Islamic Development Bank's appreciation for the strategic leadership of the government of the People's Democratic Republic of Algeria in hosting this important conference and for Algeria's pivotal role in supporting continental aspirations in the pharmaceutical and health technology sectors. We also value its efforts in promoting regional and international health dialogue among countries, given that Algeria possesses advanced manufacturing capabilities and a major regulatory market, making it well positioned to become a regional leader in this vital sector in the future.
إقليمية في المستقبل لهذه الدول الجزائر ومصر فهذه الدول يعني ربما ممكن تعطي
Algeria and Egypt are considered potential regional hubs for the pharmaceutical industry. Other countries possess limited manufacturing capabilities in pharmaceuticals only, excluding vaccines, a crucial factor to consider. Additionally, some countries have expertise in medical supplies requiring targeted support from the Algerian government. We held extensive discussions with His Excellency the Minister of Pharmaceutical Industry yesterday and today and agreed on the necessity of conducting feasibility studies based on each country's capabilities and the technical and industrial support Algeria can provide.
Moving on to another topical development, this time in Palestine. 2 Palestinian children were killed by the Zionist fire east of Khan Yunis in southern Gaza in yet another violation of the ceasefire. According to Gaza's health ministry, 354 Palestinians have been killed and over 900 injured since the ceasefire began, while the total casualties since October 7th now topped 70,000. Hospitals recently received the bodies of 2 more victims and 11 wounded. Meanwhile, Zionist airstrikes continue across Gaza, hitting areas including the eastern Tufah and Shuja'iyya neighborhoods east of Gaza City. In the same context, UNICEF says more than 9,000 children in Gaza suffered from acute malnutrition last October. The agency warns that winter will make the humanitarian crisis even worse, increasing the risk of disease, especially among children. UNICEF is calling for crossings to be opened so aid can reach those in desperate need.
Nutritional screenings conducted by UNICEF and partners identified almost 9,300 children under 5 years of age with acute malnutrition in October. High levels of malnutrition continue to endanger the lives and well-being of children in the Gaza Strip, compounded by the onset of winter weather, accelerating the spread of disease and increasing the risk of death among the most vulnerable children. We urge all parties to open the crossings into the Gaza Strip to allow humanitarian aid to pass through all possible supply routes.
Meanwhile, the UN's humanitarian office in Gaza says its facilities and staff continue to come under fire even since the ceasefire. Spokesperson Jens Lerche confirmed that occupation forces bombed an Ottawa school in Jabalia and targeted a UN project, a UN project team in Deir el-Bala earlier this month. For his part, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres confirmed that hundreds of humanitarian workers, mostly Palestinian UN staff, have been killed during the war on Gaza, the highest UN losses in any war. He also highlighted the unprecedented number of journalists killed since World War II. Guterres stressed the Palestinian right to justice and self-determination, condemned settler violence, demolitions, and annexation threats in the West Bank, and also called on the international community to support UNRWA, which he described as a lifeline for millions of Palestinians.
Hundreds of humanitarian workers, mostly Palestinian UN staff, have been killed, the largest number the organization has lost in any conflict in history, in addition to an unprecedented number of journalists killed since World War II. The Palestinian people have the right to dignity, justice and self-determination. The illegal occupation of Palestinian territory must end. The occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem, is also witnessing ongoing injustices in the form of Israeli military operations, settler violence, settlement expansion, demolitions, evictions, and threats of annexation. I call on the international community to stand firmly with UNRWA, the indispensable lifeline for millions of Palestinians.
Meanwhile, the Arab Inter-Parliamentary Union is calling on the Zionist entity to fully respect the ceasefire. In this context, Algerian Parliament Speaker Ibrahim Boughali stressed the urgent need to stop all violations to protect Palestinian civilians and ensure humanitarian aid can flow. Speaking on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, Boughali reaffirmed the Palestinians' rights and are inalienable, including the establishment of an independent, sovereign state with Al-Quds as its capital. Meanwhile, in occupied Palestine, occupation forces detained 29 young men from Al Farah refugee camp in Tubas on Friday evening, Palestinian media report. During a dawn raid in Kalkalia, 5 more were arrested, including 2 children and a woman. Over the past 4 days of the ongoing assault on Tubas, more than 166 Palestinians have been injured and around 200 others detained. And following the rise in settler attacks in the West Bank, villagers in places like Sinjil are taking matters into their own hands. Residents, mostly young people, have formed guard committees to patrol day and night, protecting their communities against these repeated assaults. Here's Zahra Farjani with the details now.
Flashlights and wooden sticks in hands, members of the Sinjil Guard Committee stand watch. In the freezing November nights typical of this region, they take turns patrolling the outskirts of their village to guard against possible attacks by Zionist settlers. It is a grassroots system born out of the insecurity imposed by violent settler groups operating under the protection of the occupation forces.
Settler attacks have increased. We've lost several people here in Sinjil, so we decided to protect ourselves. All we have is a flashlight and a wooden stick, and our phones to call other committee members, who arrive within minutes.
Settler violence is not new in the West Bank, but since the start of the war in Gaza, such attacks have surged across the region. Sinjil is among the villages regularly targeted, prompting more young men to join the Guard Committee, which now counts at least 200 volunteers ready to defend their community.
Yesterday we were out on patrol checking for settlers when we locked into an ambush. More than 15 settlers attacked us. Luckily, the youth and the Guard Committee were ready to confront them, otherwise they would have set our homes on fire.
These repeated settler attacks are not random. They fit within a broader plan to expand Zionist control over the West Bank. but Palestinians say they are not giving up their land.
قبل الحرب كان يحاول الاحتلال ومستوطنيه.
Even before the war, the occupation forces and settlers were trying to seize land around Sinjar, as they do across the West Bank. Since the conflict began, settler groups have set up 4 new outposts north of the town and another to the south. They now control more than 1,976 acres under army protection.
Similar patrol groups have recently formed across the West Bank, especially after a wave of settler attacks during the latest olive harvest. Attacks carried out in full view Zionist occupation forces, who do not hesitate to open fire on Palestinians.
On a related note, European capitals were buzzing on Saturday for the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. In Barcelona, thousands marched with banners denouncing the ongoing violence in Gaza and calling for stronger support for Palestinian rights. Paris and London also saw large demonstrations as solidarity movements rallied to demand justice for Palestinians, despite attempts by authorities to suppress the protests.
In Palestine, the genocide of the Palestinian people continues, even if they want to the politicians want to convince us that there is a ceasefire and this is the way to achieve peace. No, you won't achieve peace by procrastinating and reproducing injustice. And as an Italian, it's fundamental to be here because people are understanding, and this is the effect Palestine, a Palestine effect, in fact. It has awakened our conscience.
I'm here because we are against the rearming of Europe, and most of all because we are against the genocide that is occurring in Palestine. We have to isolate Israel until the genocide stops, until apartheid stops. We have to do everything, as the former president of the Irish Republic said, we have to expel Israel from the United Nations.
Moving on to Ukraine now, the focus of the fighting is shifting. Both Moscow and Kiev are targeting key infrastructure and energy facilities, escalating the conflict. On the diplomatic side, however, Zelensky is sending a high-level team to Washington to advance a peace plan, while signs of a potential US-Russia normalization are emerging. Here is Yasin Rikti now.
Ukraine says a large-scale Russian attack on Kiev killed 3 people and injured 24 in one of the heaviest assaults in months. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said 36 missiles and more than 600 drones targeted homes and critical infrastructure, leaving 600,000 residents without power. Ukraine's energy minister confirmed serious damage to electricity and gas facilities in Kiev and 5 other regions.
This is intimidation by Russia. The attacks are targeting civilian population in order for Kiev and the government to make decisions faster. This is my opinion. They just hate the civilians so that you accept the agreement.
Peace? I don't believe there will be peace anytime soon. With such neighbors, I doubt there will be peace at any time soon. It is getting worse and worse. It is getting worse every day.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's military said it struck Russian targets including the Aviv oil refinery in Krasnodar and the Briv aircraft plant in Taganrog, causing fires. Moscow in turn claimed it carried out retaliatory strikes on Ukrainian energy and industrial facilities. In the Black Sea, Ukrainian forces hit an oil terminal near Novorossiysk, forcing the Caspian Pipeline Consortium to halt operations. Explosions sparked fires and prompted evacuations by Turkish authorities. On its side, Russia said it foiled the Ukrainian plot to blow up a gas pipeline near Moscow. Amid all this escalation, Zelensky announced that a Ukrainian delegation will travel to the US to pursue talks aimed at ending the war.
Secretary of National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine and head of Ukrainian delegation Rostam Umarov, together with the team, is already on the way to the United States. Rostam delivered the report today, and the task is clear: to swiftly and substantively work out the steps needed to end the war. Ukraine continues to work with the United States in the most constructive way possible, and we expect that the results of the meetings in Geneva will now be hammered out in the United States. I look forward to our delegation's report following its work this Sunday. Ukraine is working for a dignified peace. Glory to Ukraine.
At the same time, the Wall Street Journal reported secret US-Russia discussions exploring economic cooperation. ExxonMobil has reportedly entered talks with Rosneft to resume work on the Sackline project, suggesting tentative steps toward renewed US-Russia economic engagement even as fighting continues in Ukraine.
Moving on to another development in Africa. Over 400 children arrived alone at the Tawila refugee camp in Sudan last month, the Norwegian Refugee Council reports. These youngsters fled escalating violence in Western Darfur, separated from their families and seeking safety. Here's Karim Musfawi with the details.
Far from the front lines of violence, a small tent offers a rare sense of safety. 400 of Sudanese children forced to flee the conflict in Western Darfur. Inside, they can be children again. They can draw, sing and play, even though their eyes reveal another story, the deep pain of being separated from their families and loved ones.
This tent around me doesn't look like anything, right? It's the only safe space right now that the children have of this part of the camp. Children caring for other children because the parents have disappeared, because the parents have been detained. This is not safety.
These children of war, caught in a conflict they don't fully understand, remain traumatized. Despite the hardships, humanitarian groups are working around the clock to ease their suffering and provide a glimpse of normalcy.
I think everybody here around me is very stressed, and that's why we call for more education during emergency. This is absolutely life-saving when so many children at the moment are going through terrible trauma of having been starved for 18 months, having lost their home, having lost members of the family.
When they first arrived here, their behavior was aggressive. They were withdrawn, violent, and displayed many negative reactions. Thank God, after we spent time with them and held several sessions, the behaviors that were negative or aggressive have become positive and good.
Since April 2023, the World Health Organization says fighting between the Sudanese army and the Rapid Support Forces has killed at least 4,000 people and displaced 12 million. Military sources report that the Sudanese army continued its advance on Saturday in the northern and western regions of Kordofan as the conflict shows no signs of slowing.
And now the news in brief with Sofia Kinturi.
The German Bundestag approved 2026 budget, allocating 11.5 billion euros to Ukraine, up from earlier proposals, to fund Patriot systems, drone, armored vehicles, and artillery for Kiev's war against Russia. The United Nations announced that nearly 3 years of ongoing war in Sudan have left over 21 million people at risk of severe hunger. The UN said on X that famine has been confirmed in 2 regions and is spreading to areas with intensified fighting. The New York Times reported a phone call between US President Donald Trump and Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro amid a major military buildup in the Caribbean. According to the report, citing a reliable White House and Venezuelan government sources, the leaders discussed the possibility of holding a meeting. The Algerian national B team has arrived in Doha, Qatar, to compete in the 2025 FIFA Arab Cup, taking place from December 1st to 18th. Led by Bouguera, the team is determined to defend the title they won in 2021. Algeria will begin their campaign on December 3rd against Sudan in Group D, which also includes Iraq and Bahrain.
And finally, Algiers' Mufti Zakaria Palace of Culture is hosting the 9th International Cultural Festival of Contemporary Fine Arts. Let's discover it with Salman Nasser.
At the Mufti Zakaria Palace of Culture, perched above the city of Algiers, the annual gathering of visual artists is back for the 9th year. The International Cultural Festival of Contemporary Fine Arts is opening its doors at artworks from 34 countries.
This is for first time in Algeria. This is the art fair bring 22 gallerists from the world, and we gallerists from Algeria. This is very good opportunity for the artists, local artists, also for the international artists to make a new project, to make the partnership with this all people here, artists and specialists.
In a world marked by division, this year's theme, Beyond Borders, brings a deeper cultural and philosophical message. It invites visitors into a visual dialogue that celebrates art, humanity, and the defense of just causes. What was once a traditional exhibition is evolving this year into a full-fledged art market, a strategic shift that highlights Algeria's ambition to position itself not just a cultural center, but as an emerging destination for creative investment.
So we're participating today in International Contemporary Festival in Algeria, and it's very significant for us because as a Palestinian art, it has been always connected with resilience, connected with identity, and keeping our Palestinian narrative, telling our stories, especially that there are always the colonization that tries to erase this history.
A place where the beauty of the artwork meets real opportunities for presentation, demand, and artistic value.
This is a promotion process between the two African countries, Algeria and Nigeria. We are trying to introduce Nigerian artists to Algeria, and we are planning to do the same from Algeria to Nigeria, and definitely other countries, African countries, not only that two countries. We are representing all Africa as motion gallery.
And on Algerian soil, home to some of the world's most iconic artists like Isyakhem, Mohamed Rasim Bashir, Baya, and many others, creators and art enthusiasts will gather for an entire week. The program features an exhibition dedicated to artists from the diaspora, along with a rich lineup of discussions exploring today's most pressing challenges in contemporary visual art.
And that's the end of our news for tonight. Thank you for watching and take care.